Hey everybody, welcome back to another video, and today we're going to be talking about the current Russian offensive going on around Chasiv. After the Russians captured Bakhmut about 11 months ago, their progress around this area sort of slowed down, and the Ukrainians did a counterattack south by Klishivka and Avdiivka. But recently, as Ukraine is facing an ammunition shortage, and ahead of the 2024 US presidential elections, the Russians have been trying to push out as many gains as possible, so they've refocused on this area. They want to focus on taking Chasiv because it's the gateway settlement towards Kostyantynivka. And what's important about this is that it's in the line of the main settlements that Russia wants to capture in the Donetsk Oblast. This line that goes from Slovyansk to Kramatorsk down to Druzhkivka and Kostyantynivka, these along with Pokrovsk are some of the most important cities inside of the Donetsk Oblast for Russia to be able to say that they've captured most of it. Russia's current stated war aims are to try to annex all of the areas that they said that they did back in September 2022. That includes the Kherson, Zaporizhzhia, Donetsk, and Luhansk Oblasts. Except it's really unlikely that they're going to try to recapture the rest of the Kherson and Zaporizhzhia Oblasts. So right now, taking the rest of Donetsk, which is some of the most industrialized and populous area, is their main goal. And right now, Chasiv is the only direction where they're making progress towards this artery, the Donetsk Oblast. You can see by the colors right here, this is the overall progress of the offensive towards this city. The greenish color was captured in February, the yellow one in March, and the red in April. Recently, just in the past 2 days, Russia has captured most of Bohdanivka as well. In the current pace of the war, this actually is decent progress. However, taking Chasiv is going to be more difficult than this open land. Chasiv is a decently industrialized city with some big buildings and two-story ones that the Ukrainians can stay inside. And so far, you can see that most of the gains that the Russians have made have been in open field areas. You can see that they've been trying to take Ivanivske since February, and they still haven't captured the full settlement. The leader of the Ukrainian armed forces, Syrsky, says that the Russians' goal is to capture Chasiv by May 9th. And I'm here to tell you that that is not going to happen at all. But it is a more realistic possibility for June, July, or maybe August if the Ukrainians aren't able to get ammunition and support, which I think is looking up because I've seen an analyst say that it's likely that there'll be a vote on the big US aid package for Taiwan, Ukraine, and Israel this week, and it's likely that it will finally pass. If that can come in, that'd likely give Ukraine the necessary shells and funds to buy shells to hold off the Russian advances. This has been the biggest problem since the start of the year back in December when the whole aid blockage thing was going on with the border deal. But based on Russia's current standing, how hard is it going to be for them to actually invade Chasiv? There's immediately some big obstacles like this hill right here by kreminna. The Ukrainians can likely position artillery in this slope back here and fire on the Russians from here. Another good thing about this hill and river right here is that it's just going to narrow the Russian advance, making it easier to control. That is unless the Russians are able to push up through Freekhorivka and onto this hill from the other side. But considering how little progress they've made through the months, this may be a multi-month operation to take over this hill. The next glaring issue is that the Donetsk Canal runs through Chasiv. This is a waterway that kind of snakes through the whole oblast, but it goes through there. This gives the Ukrainians some natural protection, and since there's only 1, 2, and 3 places that actually cross the area nearby, the Ukrainians could be able to blow the bridges, which would prevent large amounts of Russian vehicles from crossing over. This is something I'm noticing by looking at the map. There's 2 small areas right here where the water actually goes underground and goes through pipes, likely to not have to interrupt the forest. You can see here there's no actual water on the ground. And the Russian command so far, the way it works is it's very top down. And the generals who are actually on the field have a very little control of what actually goes on and mostly follow what the top people say. And the top people mostly look at maps. That's how back in, I don't even remember when, it's been so long, the Russians failed a river crossing around Belgorod, I think like 6 times, and lost way too much equipment just because the top wouldn't let them change their plans based on what was going on the ground. This is just an educated guess on my part, but what I'm thinking, the top Russian command may want the Russians to push through these 2 gaps, which would be good because these are pretty good choke points to control the advance, along with there being a lot of trees acting as better defense in the region. Those are just what's available from the map without the satellite on, but let's take a look at what's going on with the satellite map as well. You can see that there's actually a strange parallel to Bakhmut, having the main settlement be in one area and some industrial outskirts on the other part. This is what Bakhmut is like, with the main area in the center with these industrial outskirts, which kept the Russians pinned down for multiple months back in 2023, I think. But this looks like a good fortified position. There's some industrial buildings, big warehouses, and high-rise. I don't know if these are actually high-rise buildings, but they look high to me. And these are generally good areas where the Ukrainians can hold defense. The Russians are on the outskirts of this micro-district, likely holding positions inside of this tree line. But there's more good news about this area. The Ukrainians also have a big forest to the south, which they can hold positions in, as well as one to the north, along with this rail line which goes through here. This is good because it acts as natural buffers on the side, so the Russians can't outflank this area and they have to go through and take this by force. This will lead to even more exhaustion of combat capabilities. Really quick, I just wanted to come in and say that me and the Portugal battalion of NAFO have teamed up to bring you guys a fundraiser. They represent part of the international battalion currently fighting in Ukraine, and they need a truck right now because their previous one got attacked by Russian drones and got damaged. The truck that they use is to help evacuate wounded soldiers, as well as a couple other things for their operations. If you're interested in donating, the link will be in the description, and this is probably the best way to directly donate to Ukraine to actually help people on the front. A lot of Ukraine donation collection things, you kind of just send the money and you're like, okay, can you, what's gonna happen? But this, you can actually see what's going on, and you can see that they already have 9% finished. I'm gonna go ahead and drop in some money, and I'll leave the link in the description if you guys are interested in this. Focusing on flanking, looking a little bit more south, the Ukrainians are still holding on in Ivanivsky. I think this is an error. I think Ukrainians still have control over these buildings, but I could be wrong. This area with the green is an area of higher elevation, so in order to advance up into the southern part of Chasiv Yar to outflank this little district, they'd have to go uphill and through a lot of forests. I want to give another shout out to the Donetsk Canal, because this is seriously going to help prevent Russia flank this settlement from the north and south. You can see that the Donetsk Canal right here has been holding the Russians for a long time by Avdiivka and Kolomyichykha. We head back here though and turn on the satellite. Let's take a look up north. You can see that there's a good forest right here to hold defense in, as well as up north there's more forest tree lines in the settlement of tokarivka. The Ukrainians have strong fortifications up by Vasilivka because there's been like no movement here in over a year. They also have this large forest right here to pin down defense. The Donetsk Canal is always a good thing to fall back on. So overall, the main Russian advance is probably going to come in between this area. The Russians don't really want to go through another big urban fight after Bakhmut, and Chasiv Yar isn't as big as Bakhmut was. I think it's about a third of the size, population-wise and size-wise. Just a lot of rhyme. But with the forest and the Donetsk Canal, it's likely the Russians going to have to do a direct approach here. The first obstacle that the Russians are going to have to get over is this micro-district on the outside. Like I said earlier, this northern railway and southern forest create about a 2-kilometer gap that Russia has to advance through. And then if they capture the micro-district, it's likely that the Ukrainians will blow the bridges here and everywhere else that crosses to prevent large amounts of Russian vehicles going through. If they make it past there, they'll likely send infantry over, which goes into this sort of funnel shape. This would allow the Ukrainians to engage a larger amount of troops and just with the defensive advantage, reduce their equipment, and then fall back to this line and hold better defense. And there's an added benefit of having the forest all around it is that if, let's say, the Russians advance through here and the Ukrainians in this area are cut off, they could just head into the forest. And if the Russians are able to take over this whole area, the Ukrainians can just kind of run around in the forest, do different like recon raids and stuff like that, which would force the Russians to have to take the forest as well, which would cost extra time. And then going through there, they get to this main part of Chasiv Yar, and there's 2 smaller segments north around here. Just considering the rate of Russian advances over the whole course of the war, it's going to be unlikely that this is definitely not happening by May 9th, but it's likely that this will be a multiple month operation. What this is ultimately going to come down to, if Russia captures the Donetsk Oblast or not, is if the adequate support is able to come from the west. If Mike Johnson does not pass this goddamn package, I'm going to like write a diss track on him, send it to the house. I'm going to like do something. But if the Ukrainians are able to get the proper amount of shells that they need to defend this, the Russian advances are going to slow down even more, because right now the main advances they've made by Avdiivka and Chasiv Yar are due to the fact that the Ukrainians can't countershell them. I don't think that's an actual term, but I'm going to roll with it. We need to remember that Russia's current goal is to go up to here, and right now, if I drew a line here, you wouldn't even be able to see it. Yeah, right there. And the Ukrainians have been preparing fortifications in Chasiv Yar for a long time, as well as Sloviansk and Kramatorsk. I took a break, but I came back with a banger, and we got bangers on the way. Don't even worry about it. And that's all I've got for you guys today. That's it, and I'll see you later.